There is nothing more present than breathing. There is literally nothing more present than being able to pay attention to your breath. That takes you into every moment. Every inhale, exhale is a moment. So if you're aware of that, you can fully be present. Meditation and other healing modalities don't take you through the day. It's not something you can continue to practice. You can continue mindfulness and you can continue trying to be in that calm space, but being able to feel that breath and feel the moments and being in those moments is truly the core of the transformation.
My name is Francesca Phillips, and you're listening to the Good Space Podcast, a show where we help you find peace and power in work, relationships, and intuition. Welcome to the Good Space Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about a really interesting topic, breathwork. And before you think, okay, breathwork, what is this? How can it actually be useful? Please just keep listening, because I promise that some of this might actually blow your mind like it did me. So often the answer to more peace and presence is simpler than we think. That is a statement that I found to be super true and just very real to me after I especially learned about breathwork. And it's made me realize, wow, the tools that we can use to live a more fulfilling life, a more whole and peaceful life, they're simpler than we think and they're more accessible than we think. And it doesn't have to require all of these fancy bells and whistles and all of these expensive tools. Really, it's the answers within us. And sometimes we need people to draw it out of us or to remind us how to access them again. So after this episode, I hope you'll feel more empowered to get back that sacred connection to your intuition. I'm really on an intuition kick right now. And I have found that breathwork helps unblock a lot of the stuff that stopped me from connecting to my intuition. And at the least, I hope that if any of that doesn't speak to you, that at least you feel more committed to doing more for your health and well-being. At least it can trigger something like, hey, if this is not for me, what else can be for me? And so today we're going to get curious about breath work. And when my friend Emily Spang asked me to do some sessions with her as she was going through her pause certification, I figured, why not? I thought I had all my well-being habits figured out and was skeptical about breath work compared to meditation, journaling, etc. I literally didn't know what to expect. Breathing felt like something I already did. So why would this make a difference? Why does someone need to teach me how to breathe, right? So it shows you just how little I know. After a few sessions, it felt like a key had unlocked a floodgate of fresh energy. I started sleeping better, handling stress better, and I could move on from lingering beliefs and blocks I'd been holding on to. Learning to breathe again without restraint taught me to recognize when I was resisting life. Literally, I can tell when I'm trying to control situations or how I come across to people because of my shallow, intense breath. I know what that feels like now. Emily taught me how to connect to my body again and use the signals it gives me as a way to check in and tune in again to have peace. And so I'm really excited to have Emily on the show today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. That was the most beautiful review I've ever heard of breathwork.
Yay! I'm so glad. Well, we've been friends for 3 or 4 years now, and you've been on the podcast before. It's been really cool to see your journey from what you've been working on before to this. And I honestly just didn't expect it to make such a difference. And so I really appreciate you wanting to teach me about it and being willing to learn also. I know it was for your certification at the time, and it was just an amazing, symbiotic moment in time. And I really appreciate that.
Yes, it was wonderful taking you through the journey. And I will say something that you mentioned in the intro, you are the drug. That is what breathwork is, right? We all breathe. It's the only healing modality that we all have within us. We all do it all day long. And so it's really cool to teach people the power of that and using that just to alleviate whatever you're going through.
Absolutely. And I love that you call it a healing modality, because it really is. And I believe our bodies are naturally motivated to make sure that we're healthy and healing. And when we actually sit and learn what each mechanism within our body does to create that healing or that continual health, it's incredible, because I feel we don't think about it and we're not taught about it intellectually. We just know it on a physical level when we're younger. And would you say that you get conditioned out of being able to breathe in that healing way?
Yeah. And I think it's like your breath directly relates to your quality of life. So you kind of mentioned that a little bit too, of your experience of taking shallow breaths, right? Like that activates your system in a way of like fight or flight because you're taking these shallow breaths. And so you feel anxious, you feel stressed, you feel like you really can't handle what's coming at you. But then it's like when you come back to that place of taking deep breaths, you end up activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which then gets you to that state of calm. So you calm yourself down, you can handle the stress, you can get the anxiety out of your body. But most people are in that mode of just breathing really shallow or breathing. Some people breathe really fast, like really fast and shallow. And so that even like makes you feel more nervous, right? So we're just not used to taking those deep quality breaths. And I don't know if it's that we're necessarily taught that, but I think it's more like your breath relates a lot to your feelings. And if we're not in tune with what we're feeling and what's going on in our body, which I think is something we are conditioned, right? To don't feel that, don't think about that, don't listen to what your body is telling you, then that relates to your breath. So if we start with the breath and we can take it back to, okay, taking deep breaths, learning how that feels in your body, learning what your body feels like again, and then dissecting what those feelings are that are coming up through the breath, then it changes your quality of life.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful that you mentioned that, because even through our work together, I found myself ignoring certain feelings and not wanting to address them, or even ones that I didn't know were there. But because you helped me to breathe deeper, like you said, and to breathe again and connect to my body, I was able to connect that to a feeling and then process it. And so anyone who's listening, if you have been having blocks or like things in your life that don't feel like coherent or expansive, and you're like, what's going on? Like, what am I missing? Because that's kind of where I was. I was like, what am I missing that I still feel tense and I still feel like I need to control things and I still feel negative? It was the breath work that helped like reveal that. So this may be a path for you to understand what those things are that are still being blocked, that your mind is not consciously wanting to think about or to bring to the surface. So I love that. I love that. And so first of all, how did you become a breathwork practitioner? Because I feel like this is still getting into like it's still not as known as other modalities, or at least to me, it hasn't been. So I'm curious.
Breathwork hasn't really become popular in the Western world. It's something that has been used, though, in yoga, Tai Chi, Buddhism. So there's a lot of other areas of the world that really have used breathwork, know breathwork. But I discovered it through having anxiety, and the practitioner piece kind of fell into my lap. I did not expect to be a practitioner at all, but I discovered breathing and breath patterns, but I wouldn't say to the extent of like the breath work that I'm teaching and doing now. About like 4 or 5 years ago, I had extreme anxiety, like debilitating anxiety. Going out of the house was just like terrifying. And so obviously, like I tried meditation, I tried mindset work, and I was like, why will this not work for me? Like I'm sitting in silence, I'm trying to fix my mind, I'm telling myself I'm okay. None of this is working. And then it wasn't until I started introducing breathing and noticing like how I was breathing and really like the quality of breath that I was bringing into my life, that it started to change. Because then when I would leave the house and I'd feel anxious, I could calm myself down by taking deep breaths. Like a lot of people will know deep belly breaths, like deep breathing deep into your belly. And that's one of the first things that I learned. And so that's really how I got into breath and into breath work. And then this last year, I just came across a facilitator program, and I knew that it was something that I needed to do. And I knew that it was a powerful tool that more people needed. And so I dove into that, and here we are. I'm teaching people breath work and doing groups, doing one-on-ones. And yeah, that's kind of my story.
You mentioned briefly breath work patterns. Can you explain what that means?
Yes. So we use a variety of breath patterns to bring you into that meditative state. So like when you start a breathwork session, it gets you into that meditative state probably in half the time, I would say. Once you start breathing, you kind of get into that place of calm. And so some people might have experienced that, like when you meditate for long periods of time, sometimes it can, take 10, 20, 30 minutes to really get to that place of calm where there's no thoughts. You feel very centered. You feel very zen. But breathwork does that faster. And so we use breath patterns based on kind of what you're trying to do. So if you're trying to release stress, like we have one called the Halo Active. So it's like breathing in through your nose and out through your mouth. It's like, so just like releasing stress, anxiety. If we're trying to pinpoint something in the body, like there's faster breaths too, like the triactive. So it's like breathing in through the mouth and out through the mouth. So like very quick, moving energy fast. Essentially, those are the breath patterns, or some of the breath patterns that we use. There's a lot more. There's a lot more combinations that we can do, but it's really based off what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to release in a session.
Well, obviously, before we started, I didn't realize that there are actual patterns that you could do for certain releases, but it's so helpful as well to have someone like you there, because first of all, how will I know if I'm not doing this right, but like, how do I know if it's working or if I need to adjust or change? And it's also a very vulnerable thing. I feel like for some reason, breathing more kind of just puts you in the present, and it makes everything that's going on with those breath patterns and the different phases or movements that you take people through. What kind of transformations have you seen?
I mean, your transformation was amazing. And like one of the main ones of like people have emotions that they don't know how to process. But I mean, people use this for so many different things. Like that's one of the things I want people to know too, who are listening to this. It's not just if you feel like you have some emotional pain or you have some trauma in your past. We can use breath work to heal those things, but it's also for people who are trying to reach goals, for people who feel burnt out at work, right? Like all of those things in our life where we're like, there's a block, like there's something in our way and I can't figure it out. Well, when we go into the body, we can figure it out. And so I've had people come to me who have had anxiety. I've had people come to me who like don't know what their life purpose is. And they're like, I just want to figure it out. I feel like there's no next path. And we breathed, and then all of these, things have come to them. So just a range of things that people have healed. And it's like beyond that too, if you have trouble kind of tapping into that central channel, like your higher self, your intuition, this is kind of the thing that helps you clear all the thoughts and hear that. So if you're a person too, who's like, I never feel like I can hear my intuition, or I can it can help me with things, this is something to try. If you've meditated, if you've done mindset work and you're still like, I don't know how to hear my intuition, breathwork will get you there in the first session.
Yes, that was the thing I was like curious about, is if it just unblocks the noise. And yeah, you just basically said that. And I know after our first session, I had floods of inspiration and ideas and other things. And I just feel like either if you struggle with anxiety, like I've struggled with anxiety as well, or just blocks in general. It's so funny how the ego works, because I feel like it's scared to know information sometimes. And so that's also, fear can also stop us from listening to our intuition, and breath work kind of, like you said, clears that channel. And what if someone's afraid of that? Like sometimes I feel like we don't listen to our intuition because we're afraid of the answer, or we're afraid of like what it's going to bring up. So yeah, I mean, if anyone's nervous about that, what would you say?
You have to want the transformation. I think that's a big part, right? If it feels scary and you don't want to change or to get to the next step of like feeling better or reaching the goal, then you're never going to do it, right? Because all self-development, there's like pain in it. There's the growth, there's the expansion, right? It's never just like smooth and easy. And so you kind of have to want to go through that to get to the other side. But that's why it's important to have a facilitator. Like if you've never done breath work, I would not go on YouTube and just like find a breath work video, because there will be stuff that kind of comes up for you. And that's one of the things we've been trained. The program I went through, they trained us in trauma. And so as you're going through that, whatever is coming up, whatever that block is of like why you're scared to go through that, we can work through that and we can help release that. So to get into that, I guess a little bit too, what happens in the body with trauma is if something traumatic happens in your life, like you mentioned having anxiety. So at some point in your life, you had an anxious experience and it was frozen in your body. So it could be anywhere in your body. And every single time you come across something, that is how your body will react if it feels like it needs to protect you. So with the breath, we can kind of release those things in the body because we're breathing into it and we allow that energy to release. And so the fear of that, it might be scary at first, but that's why it's important to have someone guide you through this so we can work through it as it comes up and then release it, because then you won't have to deal with it anymore.
Yes. And literally, I mean, we talked about this too before we started recording our conversation, but when you don't take full breaths, you're literally not living fully. Like literally, I'm physically not living fully. And so it's incredible to connect that act of like actually breathing again with intention and deep breaths and like the way it's meant to work and connecting that to everything else in your life. I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly, but it just makes so much sense. And honestly, I was so shocked that I forgot what it felt like to breathe. Like when you were working with me and you'd be like, oh, like, let's try this breath or that breath. And then, you noticed, and actually I think about this all the time when I would yawn, when I just let myself breathe without thinking about it, it has a natural like peak at the top and it feels really good. And then you go back down and breathe out. And I remember you saying you're resisting something. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, because I would try to force myself to breathe fully and have that release and it wouldn't come. And then I would try to yawn and it was like this whole thing. So talk to me about that. How does that connect to that realization you had?
We were trained to kind of look at people as they're going through breath work and to pinpoint certain things that happen as you're breathing that may be something that they need to clear. So like with you, it was the yawning. You were like resisting, like you didn't want to get into the breath. Your body was like, no, this feels scary. We're going to stop her from breathing. Right. Which is also probably what happened in your daily life. There was something that was maybe a little scary or something that you didn't want to deal with, or, it wanted to protect you. And so you would have those short, shallow breaths. It would stop you from fully breathing. But in other ways too, sometimes it comes out through movement. Like it could be that it's stuck in your, your arms. And so like moving your arms and getting up and really moving that energy out. Like if people are not taking full breaths or not wanting to like move their chest a lot, sometimes that's like a heart space block. And so letting people like connect back to their heart is huge. Like a lot of us have a blocked heart space. Like, and for anyone who's sitting listening to this right now, like if you pay attention to your heart, can you feel it? Because that is one of the main things. Like as we're breathing, we're connecting to our body and to our heart. And not only does the breath in your life change your quality of life, but feeling your heart changes your life.
I 100% agree with that, only because of the transformation I felt. And so going back to like when I learned that, like, oh my gosh, the yawning is resisting. Like there's so much that I resist in my life. Like, even just being in the present. Like I feel like my mind sometimes always has to think about like, okay, what's next? What do I need to be working on? What's productive? And when my body just tries to breathe, breathing forces me to be present. And my ego's like, no, I don't want to be present. I want to obsess and focus on these like masculine energy, charging, get things done kind of stuff. And so even just that, like I notice, I'm like, oh, I'm resisting. Like, how can I just let what the moment is be? Like, how can I just let it be? How can I just accept it and be receptive? And granted, totally not perfect. And I actually like cringe at how much I still resist. But the fact that I'm aware, I know that eventually I'll have more good breaths than not good breaths. And I'm so thankful for that knowledge.
Yes. And to add to that, your quality of breath has probably improved in your life, right? And there is nothing more present than breathing, right? Like there is literally nothing more present than being able to pay attention to your breath. That takes you into every moment. Like every inhale, exhale is a moment. right? So if you're aware of that, you can fully be present. And that's where like meditation and other healing modalities don't take you through the day, right? It's not something you can continue to practice. Like you can continue mindfulness and you can continue trying to be in that calm space, but being able to feel that breath and feel the moments and being in those moments is truly like the core of the transformation. Like we transform all of this other stuff, all this emotion that comes up for you, but that is like the biggest thing that you can learn.
Yes. And I'm glad you put it that way, because recently my husband and I were in Zurich, and I'm now in New York City, and going from being in Zurich to now New York City takes a lot of packing, takes a lot of planning ahead. Just like, it's really stressful. Even if anyone who's just traveled in general, that can be stressful. And I remember feeling super overwhelmed, and I thought, okay, what's now? Like, what is here now? And I remember focusing on my breath, and I'm like, this is what's real right now, not the tomorrows or like the things that I'm thinking I need to get done. This is what's real. And so absolutely, like I've noticed how much more calm I feel, more peaceful I feel. And it's just a great anchoring tool. And it's so worth working with someone like you to kind of get that foundation and that knowledge rewired again into your body, into your mind, and then to use it, like you said. And I love that you put it that way, that it literally is something when I'm on the subway or I'm walking or I'm at work or whatever, it's there and I can tune into it in like 2 seconds to just reground myself.
I think too, for anyone who has experienced other healing modalities like meditation, yoga, Tai Chi, whatever it is, right? If it didn't work for you, breath work is kind of the next step, right? Even if you think it's not going to work for you, it probably will. Like I've never taken someone through a session and they're like, they're maybe skeptical before, but after they're like, that was the craziest experience I've ever had. Like I did not expect it to be like that.
I was one of those people. I was definitely, that was me.
You feel like it's like, no way, this isn't going to work. Try it, because that's like the next level of kind of commitment to your self-development journey of like, oh, all these things, other things don't work. Like get into something new, right? Like this is something not a lot of people know of. And the more people we can have breathing and like actually feeling into their bodies, the better our world will be.
I agree 100%. Okay. So tell me about some science. Like I want to know too, the like inner workings of it and just the nerd like knowledge of it. Like tell me all the things that you know.
Yes. Okay. So when you breathe, you increase the oxygen in your blood, which activates your parasympathetic nervous system. So that is the system within you that makes you feel calm, makes you not feel stressed. And so, there's a lot that goes into it. And we can include this in the show notes of like a full description I have on my website of like the sciencey stuff behind it, because there's so many things that happen in your body. Really what you need to know is when you're in that fight or flight mode, you're not in your parasympathetic nervous system. So breathing, your breath is very shallow, right? You're probably very tense. Like you're not feeling into your body. You're feeling all into your head. And so that is when you just like almost the world is attacking you. And so when you're breathing and you can activate that parasympathetic nervous system, it allows you to be in that state of calm because you're telling your body you're not being attacked. You're loosening your body and you're like feeling into your body. And so that's kind of the process of it, of how your body works with breath.
That's interesting because breath, that puts breath being the life source even into more like clarity for me. Like your body actually reacts based on your breath. So it literally is like the core to everything, obviously, other than like intuition, the spirit, all that stuff, but like the physical core to everything. And I feel like if you know how to get that breath tuned into the parasympathetic, you become like a teammate with it. Basically, you're like, okay, breath, let's work together. Let's keep us in sync. Let's keep us coherent and like help us have a better experience. And I totally agree that it makes your life quality much better.
And you're training your body to be in that, right? The more you breathe, the more you do breathwork sessions, the more you're paying attention to your breath, you're training your body to live in the parasympathetic system. and not feel like it's in that fight or flight, which just that shift changes your quality of life. And I know we've talked about that a lot, but really, to anyone listening, like if you're thinking about any of this and you feel like there's parts of your life that are not to the quality that you want it to be, like those are the shifts that have to happen.
Yep, absolutely. And the cool thing is the sessions that we've done together, even though you block off an hour just in case we need more time, it usually was only like 20 minutes or like 30 minutes. It really does not take much to start feeling the effects of it. And I just remember how coherent my body felt. Like everything was pulsing with this energy and it felt like bigger than me. And I felt like just more energized, like I could do things longer and not feel a drain at all. And it's just really cool. It's really cool.
And I'm sure you felt into your intuition more too. It's like you felt into like the source energy. Like that's what was flowing through your body.
Yeah. And you know that it's source because it's more powerful than anything you've experienced. Because there are times where I like, and then intuition can also speak very quietly and like a voice within. And sometimes that's how it speaks to me. But yeah, when it's like that level, you're like, okay, this is beyond anything I felt before.
Well, and I think we've talked about this too before, like you very much are in like your head. And I think a lot of people are, right? Of like so many thoughts and like always having racing thoughts of like, there's so many things to do. Like your doer is always going. And so it is when your doer is going and you're like, I need to do this. What am I thinking about? What is the next thing? It's so hard to hear your intuition. Like how can you hear that when there's all that noise? Right. And so this is just one of the ways to cut through that and get right to it. So then I feel like your intuition becomes louder. Like it's always loud. I think it's just, we don't let it be loud.
Yeah, exactly. Like it doesn't have enough room to influence us essentially. Yeah, I agree with that. Well, cool. How often do you do breath work? Do you do it every day? Like, do you suggest that people do it every day?
So I have been really focusing on leading my life in more feminine energy. So really feeling into what feels good for the day. And so I don't necessarily say like, I need to do these things every single day to feel good. I try to breathe every day, but it's not always at the same time. And then it's also like the length of when I breathe is different. Like sometimes I'm really feeling a meditative session, which is like a longer session. It's like 30 minutes to 45 minutes. And sometimes I just want to breathe for like 5 minutes just to get in the flow, calm my system down, get rid of any anxiety I feel. But I love to feel into that and pay attention to like, what is going to be nourishing to me. And I think that's one of the things too, when you start to connect to your breath more, like the breath is so feminine. Like it takes us out of like the masculine world we live in. And just that practice has like let me feel into that because I've been feeling into my body more. And I know what that feels right. Like I can feel my intuition. And so that's how I try to lead my life of just what feels good today. Like, do I want to breathe now? Do I want to breathe later? Like, maybe I don't breathe today. Maybe I did a really long session yesterday. Like what feels good? What would nourish me?
It's a great way to look at it. Even if it's just, I worked for an hour and I'm going to take 30 seconds to breathe. I love doing that. Just, okay. Even just recognizing when I feel overwhelmed. Wow. I feel so overwhelmed right now. Let me just pause for 30 seconds and breathe. And what a difference.
Yeah. And it's so easy. Like I tell people all the time, breathe for 60 seconds throughout your day. Like as you feel whatever emotion is coming up for you that you're kind of trying to work through or get rid of, use the breath throughout your day, right? Like we are breathing all the time. So the more intention you can put into it, the more you will get out of it. And then you don't have to feel overwhelmed and like end up feeling burnt out and so much stress and anxiety. You can just build that into your day.
Yep, it's great. And have a pen and paper nearby just in case.
Always have a pen and paper nearby. I feel like those are like the best. Like you breathe and then you're like, oh my gosh, I have all these ideas.
Yeah. I mean, I get a lot of those too when I'm meditating, but especially with breathing because it just gets me there quicker. I definitely get a flood of information and it's great. And I love that you connected the breath to feminine energy, intuitive energy. I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast, they want to know the difference between masculine and feminine and how to balance them. And this is such a great tool to just get you there, even if it just gets you in the feeling of it, like knowing how it feels again. It's just awesome. Like when you can put a name to things or understand when it's happening, that often is like the key, really. I mean, yeah, it can be as simple as that. And also as, I guess it's not difficult. I think it is pretty simple. Like just having that knowledge to know when it's happening. And then you're like, great.
Yes. And that's, I think, something that a lot of people still need to learn. Like we're so disconnected from our feelings. I know so many people who, if you ask them how they feel, they can't even come up with a feeling word, because it's like, we're not taught that. But with that, we're not taught to like feel what our body feels like. And so I think that too, with breath work is a huge transformation of just suddenly feeling your whole body, like feeling what it feels like to be in your body. And that is when like you can start to be like, oh, I'm noticing I'm feeling this way, or I'm noticing this is coming up for me, when all of a sudden you're tapped into your body and what's happening. And that is a very feminine thing too, right? To be in tune with your body and not just run on a schedule that was designed for us, right? Like not run on the 9 to 5 just because that's what the world is doing. Paying attention to our body. Like, do we need more sleep today? If we can do that, right? Do we need to rest at the end of the day? Like, what is it that our body needs to heal and to feel nourished?
Yes. I'm really grateful you brought that up because, again, we have the answers within us. Our body has all the answers and it literally is giving it to us constantly. And like you said, we are so disconnected and not used to feeling that we don't know how to feel. And that's literally the key to your answers, is feeling everything. And I'm actually reading this book about validation. So it's called I Hear You. And it's about how to validate people, even if you don't agree with them, even if you do agree with them. Like it's just basically a way for people to feel seen and heard, and how to understand that. And he mentions in the book that if you notice, most times when you speak to someone and you say, oh, how are you doing? They say, I'm good. But rather than saying I'm good, he encourages the reader to start saying, you know what? I'm excited. I'm grateful. I'm content. I'm feeling a little stressed. Like you said, naming the feeling. He was saying it helps you with your empathy and your ability to validate people, because you are able to label when you felt excited or when you felt scared or when you felt stressed. So then later when someone talks to you and says, oh, I'm feeling stressed, you're like, I can relate to that because you've named it to a past experience. And I thought that was so powerful.
Yes. Okay. So that makes me think of actually a session I just took someone through, and naming what you're feeling is not something we're taught at all. Like we feel the emotion, but we never bring it to the surface really. And so when you name it, you're like, I feel stressed, I feel frustrated, I feel angry, whatever it is. When you name it, it takes its power away. So this session I just took someone through, we started with just sitting in silence, no music, no nothing, and just scanning the body and naming what was there. Because there's so much there usually that we are like programmed to ignore, or we just bypass, right? We're like, we don't need to worry about that. Like, I feel pain in my leg, I feel frustrated, I feel sad, whatever it is, we're just going to bypass that and keep moving through life. But when you take a second and all of a sudden you're like, what is going on in my body? Like, let me name all of these things. That also helps you get clarity. That also helps you connect to your intuition, because all of a sudden, all of those things, that's the noise, are cleared because you've named them, you've taken their power away. And then you can move through whatever healing you need because you've set them to the side, right? Like you've given them less importance within you.
Yes. Yes. It's such a great way to phrase it and to put it. And I love that. And actually, as you were saying this, I'm like, man, we should, each of us, if you're down, give like 1 or 2 things that someone listening can do right now to like integrate what we just talked about on this episode. Okay. So you want to go first? Or?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So if you want to start breathing, connecting to your body, I would say the first thing is just paying attention to your breath. purely just for the next couple days, paying attention to how you're breathing. Are you taking deep breaths? Are you taking shallow breaths? Do you stop yourself from breathing? Are you holding your breath? Because like when I realized a long time ago when I was having very bad anxiety, I would actually like hold my breath when I'd be somewhere. You're supposed to be breathing as a person. Like there is no way you feel good.
Yeah. You're supposed to be breathing as a person. I
right?
love that.
Yeah, it's like keeps us alive. And if I'm sitting there holding my breath because I feel so anxious, like it's only going to make me feel worse. So pay attention. That can be like really easy homework. And it's just an intention, right? How am I breathing? And then I would say too, like getting familiar with your body and with your heart and seeing if like what you feel, what you're aware of, like bringing awareness to your body is really powerful. And that's where too, once you start to bring that awareness to your body, if there is something that comes up, that is where you can start in your breathwork journey or in your meditation journey or whatever modality you choose, right? Whatever feels good to you, that's where you can start. But we first have to tune in to what is going on here.
So my two, the first one's going to kind of tack on to the two that you've said, and it's to not judge. Because when you're aware and you're doing all those things, it's so easy to be like, oh gosh, how dare you hold your breath? Or like, oh, I must be really bad, because it's just release judgment. Like allow it to happen, allow it to be felt or recognized. And there's no judgment. Like you're not good or bad or conscious or unconscious. Like it's just happening. Right. So that would be my first action. And then the second one is when someone asks you how you're doing, don't just say good. Or if you say, you know what, I'm doing well because this happened, or I'm feeling stressed, or just try not to say good and replace it with what you're actually feeling in that moment.
Yeah. And I think that too comes back to just like, I know you said validating, like validate yourself, like give yourself enough importance to be like, I can share how I feel. Like you are not a burden to anyone. Like your feelings and your emotions are not a burden. Your existence isn't a burden. So just share how you feel, because odds are someone around you feels the same or they've been through it. And maybe sharing it will actually get you to the place of like, here's some tools that can help you, or here's a person to talk to, right? Like when we keep everything in our head, no one can help us. And we're all here just to help each other.
Absolutely. And I always envision it as you're allowing that person to expand and grow their love by helping you or being there for you. Because sometimes it can be a pride thing where you're like, oh, I don't want them to feel, well, like you said, burdened, but then also like, it's like embarrassing to kind of accept that love and help. But it's like, no, people actually, they feel joy and they feel connection themselves when you allow yourself to open up. And the crazy thing too is something that popped up from what you said about us being so disconnected. I was just thinking about how when I was younger as a kid, I always felt like I was on the outside looking in all the time. Like everyone else was experiencing emotions. Everyone else was feeling things. And I just felt like there was this globe in this glass where like I was knocking and I'm like, I want to be part of experiences too. But I thought, oh, okay, maybe I'm just not meant to. And I just realized right now, it probably was because I was so disconnected from what I was feeling and I didn't know how to label it. I could only understand what someone else was feeling, but I didn't know how to name it for myself. And obviously ego is also a part of that disconnection, but I just, wow, it's like incredible to think about. Like, what if I knew this stuff back then? Like, what would my experience be, you know?
Yeah. And your connection to yourself reflects the connection you have to others. So if you're not connected to yourself, your connection to the world around you is going to always feel like that, like you're outside looking in, right? And so that is one of the things too with the breathwork company that I'm growing now, Harbor. That is the main goal. That is our intention, is connection, because we don't have enough of it. Like we don't have enough connection with ourselves. We don't have enough connection with each other. And when you change that, it's like you can start to feel, you can start to experience other people's feelings. And that's like the best part of the world, right? Like helping each other, feeling each other, like being in the experience of like this life But if you're disconnected from everything, like you can't get there.
That was really powerful. You're right. It just puts you into the experience of life. I love that. Okay. Tell me about everything. Like, where can people find you? What is your company? Give me all the things.
Yes. So my company is called Harbor, and we are just creating a space for people to find connection within themselves and outside of themselves. So we focus a lot on group breathwork sessions, group meditation sessions. I do a little bit of both so people can find what works for them, because I don't think there's just like one right answer. Like, breathwork is amazing, but also sometimes you just feel like sitting in silence. So like I give you those tools to do that as well. And so we do the group sessions. I have some one-on-one spots, but really that is the goal, just making a space for connection. And so I've noticed so many people being burnt out, stressed, anxious, overwhelmed, especially like within corporate companies right now. And so that was really like my driving force of like, why are we feeling so disconnected? Like, no one should feel this way. And we can create a space where everyone can like find like-minded people and find people who can like support them through their own experience. And I just think when we do things together, it's so much better. So you can find us at harbor.com. That's with 2 A's. And then on Instagram, we're Harbor with 2 A's. And if you want to follow me, I'm just Emily Spang _. And yes, come check us out. Come say hello. I would love to meet all of you.
Yes. And we will make sure that all of those are linked in the show notes so you can click over easily. Thank you so much, Emily. Is there one thing that if nothing else was soaked in, you're like, at least this one thing you hope someone takes away from this conversation?
Find yourself. That's where it starts. Like, every single thing in your life starts with yourself. And so if you feel like there's disconnect anywhere in your life, just start within. And it's a hard place to start, but if you can start there, like, your whole world gets like juicier and better just because you were able to like take those steps.
Great. Well, thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Now it's time for an affirmation. I allow my breath to anchor me to the present and transform my being to higher emotions. If you found today's tips inspiring or thought-provoking, share it right now on social media and make sure to tag me at Francesca A. Phillips or at Find Your Good Space, and also weigh in the comment section at findyourgoodspace.com. You can find links in the show notes. And if you have a spiritual or mindfulness problem that you want me to unpack on an upcoming The Good Space episode, or an awesome manifesting story you want to share, give my podcast phone line a ring right now at 917-719-0867. Also, don't forget to download my free morning routine guide. It's what helped me reduce my anxiety, increase productivity, and so much more. The link to everything I mentioned is in the show notes. See you soon.